From New York and on the new Hot 97 app, Ebro in the morning. On Hot 97.
Ebro in the morning. Richard. Beautiful Laura Styles. Rosenberg. Random T. Rosenberg.
No. Japanese Tower Records T. And my new name is Richard Petty.
Because, he just paid.
No, don't. We
It's
don't
okay.
right now.
DM? Okay. You paid to get a DM back that you deleted. You paid $20 just so you would have evidence of somebody trying to be
petty.
shitty to you.
Yep. Richard Petty.
God.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's an amazing would you call this a documentary?
I like to call it a nonfiction film because I feel like that sounds cooler.
I like nonfiction film. I like nonfiction film. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't, because it's out on digital HD and it drops in November on DVD, Who Streets, and your name, please.
Sabaah Folayan.
Sabaah Folayan. I didn't want to attempt it
How do you
because
do on the
I
last
knew I was
name?
going to.
Sabaah.
Last name?
Folayan.
It's almost like Folayan.
It's almost, yeah. Where's your family from?
My family's American, just regular black.
What's the name's origin?
The name is Yoruba. It means she who walks with dignity.
So you go West African, Folar and Wale.
Got it,
Folar,
yeah. Okay, 'cause it did sound like
boom,
Nigerian,
it's all
yeah.
woven in there. There it is. Let's give it up for Sabu one time, ladies and gentlemen. Who streets, our streets. This is the definitive piece, they're saying. This is the movie, the nonfiction film that captures what happened in Ferguson in its truest form. I have not seen it, but tell me how it begins and kind of walk us through. I mean, because I think for many people, we saw the news, we saw the coverage, we've seen the social media, we know the Mike Brown story, right? But what are you capturing in this film that you felt needed to really be spotlighted?
Well, this film really takes it from a human perspective because when Michael Brown was killed and the protests started, the news was very polarized. Everything was about looting and rioting and their thugs and Black Lives Matter and police brutality and all these buzzwords, but nobody was really paying attention to the humanity underneath all this. So when I saw the news and being a Black person and living in the society and knowing the reality, I saw a community that was grieving and I saw people who needed to be supported and held. So I went there hoping to study the trauma that was taking place and to show how this was going to traumatize the entire community. I was pre-med at the time. I wasn't a filmmaker. And then after kind of having these little questionnaires and trying to ask these multiple choice questions about people's emotions and things like that, we realized it wasn't really the environment to do that kind of study. So we started rolling and asking questions. And from there, we got this really deep, intimate story, a family story. It's about children. All of our main characters are parents. And you see what they're fighting for and how they're thinking about this struggle. And you understand that this is a movement that's really rooted in love for each other, love for people who haven't even been born yet.
So you got to Ferguson when? What moment did what day, I guess, did you and your crew get to Ferguson?
It was about September 8th or 18th. I remember it had an 8 in it, and it was about a month after Mike Brown was killed.
Got it.
And so people were still coming out into the streets every day. There was still tear gassing. It was after the initial kind of spark of things, but the protests were still going strong.
And the protests were driven by people from all walks of life that lived in and around Ferguson, right? But there were also people who showed up from around the country who were just interested in being a part of a movement that was going to be for this community and for people who are dealing with police brutality, correct?
Yeah, and I really have to give so much props to the people of St. Louis. I wish my brother Damon, my co-director, were here with me today because that city has really changed my life. The people, the residents of St. Louis are some of the most straightforward, direct, honest people. Like, they really engage with what's going on immediately around them. And I think a lot of us spend our time and spend our days in our own head and we're thinking about our own stuff and we're online. We're not really thinking about what's happening in our own backyard. And so the people in that city just had this fire to say enough was enough. And I think a lot of people have been feeling that. We have been feeling it as a country since Trayvon was killed. We had started to talk about it. But when those people, those everyday working class, regular Black people came out into the streets, something changed, and it felt like it was time for all of us to take action.
Were any of the people hesitant to be so honest on camera? Like in fear of repercussions of any kind?
Like when it first started, I think people were really eager to talk on camera because they wanted to get their story out.
Right.
But when they started to see how the media was portraying them and, turn on the news and see their words taken out of context, there started to be a lack of trust for the media. So it ended up being an advantage to us because we were just regular people with a small camera, and we were coming back day after day. And, we started to build that trust with the community that they would let us in and talk to us.
Did you unpack or discover any of the, because there's obviously a long history of racism in St. Louis, in Missouri, and in that Bible Belt as you kind of gateway to the South, if you will, right? Were you able to learn any more in depth about the things that led to this moment of Mike Brown being killed in the street and the atmosphere around this relationship with this community and the police?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that was a huge common thread with everybody that we interviewed was fines and ticketing. So the way St. Louis is set up, there are 91 municipalities. So Ferguson is about a 6-mile wide neighborhood in St. Louis. So it was really the whole city that was involved in this, but they called it Ferguson. And Ferguson is like a neighborhood, like it's nice. It's green grass, regular working class people. There is definitely poverty, but driving through St. Louis, you can drive through 4 or 5 different municipalities on your way to work. 4 or 5 different police departments can give you a traffic ticket for the same thing. And so the average person has 2 to 3 warrants on them. And so you get that warrant, you get arrested for that traffic ticket, those 3 tickets for the same violation, go to jail, lose your job, lose your apartment. And this is a extremely, extremely common situation that people are facing. So when Mike Brown was stopped for jaywalking, not only did it activate that frustration of seeing his body lay in the street for 4.5 hours, but it also activated that frustration of people constantly being harassed for the smallest little
feeling picked
infraction.
on, like I'm picked on, y'all picking.
Absolutely.
And we talk about here in New York City, because you have a lot of young kids that, they're 14, 15 years old, right? And then 16, 17, hell, up to 20. You make mistakes, right? You didn't pay your registration. You got to get to work. I don't have no money. I jumped the turnstile ticket. You do these things, and being an irresponsible young person, I'm an irresponsible old person, you don't handle that, you get a warrant, right? And so this thing becomes, now you're just dealing with traffic tickets and warrants and going to court and doing this, and it just becomes a part of your life, and it can feel frustrating. Because after Ferguson kind of, the tone kind of quelled a little bit and it calmed a little bit, it felt like the local community was going to get active in politics and start being active in picking the people they wanted to be in city council and picking the people that they wanted because there was reports of low voter turnout and participation, et cetera, et cetera. Were you able to get into any of that?
Yeah, so the film focuses particularly on the protest movement in that moment, but there is and continues to be both protests and political engagement.
Right, because St. Louis is still some protests happening over that cop that got off before Mike Brown even got murdered.
Exactly. And but there's also, a senator who's a brother who was part of the movement. He's got tattoos on his face. He's a state representative. There's a 19-year-old alderman who was a part of the movement. Kayla Reed, who's in the film, moderated the mayoral debate. They actually endorsed the candidate, and they didn't end up winning, but I think it's extremely powerful, that this small movement was even able to get that far. And, the thing is about participating in democracy, it is extremely important, especially in local politics. We may not be able to affect national politics in the way that we want, but our mayors and our city council people, it's important to engage in that. But when we're a numerical minority, you can yell vote, 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 vote all you want to.
Numbers.
You know what I mean? We would have to get 100% voter turnout and, other people not turn out. And I think the other thing that's really important to note is that voter repression is really going strong. That Civil Rights Act that we won had a time limit on it, and a lot of those things that we've gained are being repealed. So it's not just a lack of desire to vote. Like, there's a lot of really structural issues that will prevent us from engaging in democracy.
Yeah, that's one thing they do is that they'll tell you it's just that people don't come out. And there are problems with voter turnout, of course, but there's a big part of it that it makes it very easy to have low voter turnout because some of those things are in place.
Finding where you actually vote, they make complicated. Sometimes the ID systems, they make complicated. You have to register. There's a lot of things that you have to track just to be able to participate, which speaks to what we were just talking about with feeling picked on, right?
Yeah, like you're just stuck in a thing.
It's like, why is this so hard for me to actually just go vote? Why do I have to deal with all? And they do that on purpose.
Now, how do you feel when people talk about Black Lives Matter, it's like, it's weird. It's a term that refers to a specific movement, but is also used incredibly loosely with people both supportive of it and unsupportive of it, not even fully knowing what they're talking about. So how would you describe what the Black Lives Matter movement is, where it is, and things of that nature?
That's a good question. I'm going to tread lightly here because, within the movement, it's hard to figure out who to credit and what. And part of what we wanted to do with this film was not to make it be about organizations, but to make it be about human beings, because I think a lot of times when you put a label on something, a hashtag on something, people feel like they have to choose whether or not to be a part of it. But in reality, we make up society. We are all part of social movement, whether we're standing on the sidelines or whether we're participating, we are all part of it. And so to me, the phrase Black Lives Matter, those words, I think are extremely important, that we need to repeat that to each other and to ourselves as Black people over and over and over. The organization is something that was founded by 3 wonderful queer Black women, and I think the people of Ferguson and what they did in response to Mike Brown's death is what gave that organization, its legs and its meaning in the popular culture.
Because it's interesting, the words Black Lives Matter, right? Like the other day, I was just, don't ask why, I was randomly looking at Justin Bieber's Instagram, and I saw that he had posted Black Lives Matter a few weeks ago, right? And I was like, oh, that's cool. And obviously, I know what he's writing that. He's not saying, I endorse the group organizes Black Lives Matter. He was matter. He might be. Maybe. My guess is he was saying, I agree with these words, and I want to say it, which is probably more important than endorsing any one group is saying those words,
Absolutely.
Right? But I just think it creates an interesting conversation because the group has a name that connotes something very important, but you don't necessarily always understand that group. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's part of, either doing your research or taking things at face value sometimes, and also knowing the when and wheres and whys of, why you're going to be compelled. I think they designed it that way. It's very smart to be something that will live on generationally, right? To say these lives matter, because in this country, no matter what time period you look at in the development of this country, Black lives did not matter. The fabric of what America is based on, is built on using Black lives and then casting them off. That is what the fabric of all of this wealth in this country is built on. So I think that was a phenomenal. I'm not even disagreeing. I'm just extending.
Neither am I.
That's a phenomenal design.
Well, they were able to. Whoever initially came up with those words was able to sum up what the overarching problem is. Mm-hmm. Is that ultimately, and a relatable thing, because it's as I think a lot of people point out, like, it's not trying to say your life doesn't matter. It's simply saying these lives matter. They haven't been treated as they do.
Right.
I just find it very interesting because as time goes on and a group has its own things, you never know what you're saying when you're talking about the group versus although there's a book about Black Lives Matter and its foundation that I need to read that I just got, that I want to gain to understand it more. I just find it to be an interesting conversation.
Sabaah, so this documentary, this nonfiction film, Whose Streets, is available. I saw it say digital HD, so that means it's on the streaming platforms?
Yes, it's available on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Fandango.
Everywhere. Yeah. Damn, she shouted Fandango. I ain't heard Fandango shout out in a minute.
Need that.
Shout to Fandango.
Yeah.
And it'll be on DVD November 14th as well.
And did I hear you say this was your first entree into making film?
Very first.
Were you a student of film? Or like, what's your background?
No, she was a med student.
Okay, well, I would like her to
She
say
just said it. That's right.
I
was paying attention.
Thank you, girl.
Keep going.
I was pre-med, so I had taken the MCAT. I was preparing to go to med school. You have 3 years on those scores, so I was like...
That's very, very strict parenting right there. Thus the Yoruba name. That's that you will be going to med school.
So, I was going down that path, but as I'm thinking about going into hundreds of $1,000s of debt to go to med school, and I'm going through the process, it just wasn't feeding my spirit. And I had always written and done theater and had this artistic side of me, but I never thought that I could make any money. So I was like, I'm going to take 2 years and just see what could happen. Just see, go out on my own and figure it out. And this was kind of just me, you know, I very much rely on my ancestors for inspiration and guidance. And this was just me kind of listening to the ancestors, and, you know, they put the right people in my path at the right time, and it happened.
Are you working on anything after this Who Streets project?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm working on a fiction project that is about a Jamaican woman warrior during colonial British times who held off the British for like 50 years. Like, she's just a serious badass. And the show is going to be exploring, you know, what does it look like to create alternative societies even while you have an oppressive system in place.
That's dope. Have you, I mean, because right now, you having, I guess, people creating film, creating anything, there's so many platforms, right? Has this opened up conversation, like people seeing that this has been completed by you and your comrades? Has this opened up opportunities, the phone ringing crazy of people wanting to offer you some nice budgets to work on these future projects?
I mean, yeah, it's been, you know, there have been a lot of ongoing conversations. People, you know, what's next? I think the interesting thing for me is continuing to be able to be an artist who is free, because a lot of time as Black people, and particularly Black women, it's like, it's hot to be a Black woman right now, but they want you to talk about a particular topic. They want you to show up in a particular way. So I'm motivated by making sure that I can stay open and have the type of opportunities to be creative, because as much as white supremacy and racism are killing us and destroying us, we also have to turn our mind away from that to imagine something new, imagine what it is that we want to build and create.
Otherwise, you get stuck in that.
Right.
Ladies, give it up for Sabaah, and gentlemen, and everyone else who wants to get Who Streets available everywhere and dropping DVD November 14th. And how do you say your last name one more time?
Folayan.
Folayan. Sabaah Folayan. Remember that name. Give it up for it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.